Hello and welcome to that Eurovision podcast, Eurovision with a Slice of Life. My name is Rory and I'm doing all right today. My mum has been over from Ireland for the past for sort of 2 weeks or so, and has dropped her off at the airport today. She's gone back to Ireland now, so very sad, but also really really happy because I am now fully vaccinated as well. So I am running around. I've got so many things going on, and I have a potential job prospect as well. So I'm really, really happy. And I'm just so excited to get into this topic. So, yeah, joining me.
Jazzi, here. I have been really, really busy this week. Like, I have started a new job on Wednesday, so it's all going on in my life. But I'm glad to finally be able to wind down, sit down, and talk about something that happened over the weekend. Well, didn't really happen over the weekend, but something that was shown over the weekend, and getting excited to just kind of delve into it a little bit.
Bradley, I've had a very busy week for work. It's politics, so I won't go into it because it's probably bored everybody, but I've also been ordering some computer bits because I'm trying to build my own computer and they've just arrived, so that's very exciting. But apart from that, I've not really been doing too much. So I'm really excited to talk about this year. It's an interesting year. It isn't the best quality, but it is fun. So
Tim here. Not much has been happening really. It's just like sleep, work, chill, sleep, and that was it for about 5 days. And it's now Saturday. The weather is a bit meh over here. It was raining earlier, but now it's sunny. But not much has been happening really. It's just, but the thing is though, now that the restrictions have finally eased up, I've made so many plans this month, and God forbid, let's just not hope a certain thing would stop me from attending stuff this month.
Touch wood. Touch wood.
Yeah, touch wood.
Hi, I'm Angus. I'm Neil. I can pretend I've been very busy with stuff because my mother's birthday is coming up and I'm preparing for my thesis defense. But honestly, I've just been trying to relax, trying to enjoy the summer and having a short break from everything. Also fully vaxxed now, so slowly preparing to get back into things.
Fantastic. Also, just welcome Angus to the team. It's fantastic to have you with us and join us for all of this stuff. And yeah, we might as well just get started on this, really. So, as we may have alluded to in our intros, we are going to be returning to our year retrospectives, and we've chosen to follow in the footsteps of Eurovision again and review the most recent year to be sort of broadcast, I guess, or like rewatched. And that was 2006. So this is Athens, Greece, Feel the Rhythm. And yeah, it was their first time hosting after Helena Paparizou won in 2005. And we had Sakis Ruvas hosting with Maria Menounos, who's absolutely who was big in the US at around that sort of time. Has anyone heard of her since? I don't think so. And we had about 39 countries around that, I think. Definitely in the high 30s. Take part overall in the whole contest, and the contest was won by Finland, Lordi, Hard Rock Hallelujah. Just to kind of get the ball rolling on this one, what are your sort of initial impressions of 2006 as a year?
I guess my initial impressions are the first half I find really, really, really weak, and it's like, oh, this is a struggle to sit through. But if you're one of those Euro fans who struggle at the beginning, just wait, because the song quality gets a lot better around the halfway mark. And I would say my favourite entries, it's kind of a weird one for me, and I think I tweeted about this. My favourite two entries of 2006 are the winner and the host entry. The winner obviously being Finland with Hard Rock Hallelujah, Lordi. I just think it was so different for the time. I don't think we'd really ever seen anything like this in the contest prior to 2006. The only thing that even remotely was like this was it was the Norwegian entry in 2005 was somewhat similar, but this took it to a whole new level. This was insane. Like, this could have gone one or two ways for Finland. This could have either won the contest or absolutely done absolutely nothing. It was so different for the time. And I love this song. It's one of my favorite winners of all time because it's just the type of music I really like, and it's really, really nostalgic. I don't think an entry like this, that type of rock would work now. I think people would see it as a bit dated, but it's still really, really good for the time. And my winner of that year is actually not Finland, it's Greece with Anna Vissi's Everything. I think that performance is so emotional and she puts her all into it, and I don't know whether it's how she performs a song or how dramatic and amazing the song is, but I absolutely adore it. And I said I've always been torn because Finland is one of my favorite countries in the contest, but if there was ever a year a country should have done the double, it was 2006. Greece should, in my opinion, have won again. And I've never felt like that about a host entry before. So just to put it out there, Greece's entry of 2006 is my favorite host entry of all time. So no, I don't feel like anything will ever beat it for me in terms of host entries. So yeah. The quality of the show, I think, was really, really good for 2006. It was quite unlike now that it seems like they kind of really just got on with it. They had their introductory act and then they got into the songs, and then the intervals didn't feel too long either before we just got into the voting. It felt like Greece were really, really on it in terms of the production of the show. There is one thing that I didn't really like, is that the Greek audience tended to boo quite a lot. And I just don't think, like, nowadays that would be seen as acceptable at Eurovision. And I don't know how it was taken at the time, especially whenever Lithuania got some points. It just, like, I get that at the time Greece took Eurovision very, very seriously, and the fact that this was a joke entry kind of may have offended them a little bit. But I still think it was a good song. I still think it was a good, fun song. Do I think it should have won? Absolutely not. But did it deserve the audience reaction that it got? Absolutely not.
Okay, well, for me, what can I say about 2006 other than it's a great show? I mean, other than the fact that, you know, they've just released this in high definition and make everyone look pretty. There is quite a few that I really like, but I will name two. One of them is, of course, you can't go to 2006 without talking about Carola. And just because, you know, she's the queen of Wind Machine and she had that very, very, very long cape. Edna Mode might disagree with this, but, you know, yeah, I agree that was very, very, very iconic. Another one, I'll just say the name because I know somebody else really likes it and they've actually got it in their background as their picture. I actually do like, that is Sylvian Knight, I think. So, yeah, I know she was just playing a character, but for the love of God, that was very iconic. And if you've seen the video where she was cursing everyone and calling Corona I don't think I'm going to say the word, but it begins with an S and begins with a T. Figure that words out. The show-wise, it was a good quality. You know, even if it was just a test run of high definition, everyone looked very pretty. And, you know, it didn't take much time. Like Jazzi said, they were just on a ball with it. You know what? If Greece were to host it again, I would not have any issues. Looking at the fact that they were trying so hard for in the lead up to 2005 to win. So they do host it well. And, you know, since the way the show goes and the way the format has changed, I don't think they'd have a problem. And I think they'd still put on a great show.
Just before we go on, I think we should do 10 points to whoever can do the best impersonation of Sylvia Knight doing "Ungrateful bastards, you vote for me because never." I love that video so much.
Yeah, I do have like a list of my favorites, like a top 5, but I'm sure we'll get into our favorites later on, so I won't really spend much time talking about them at the moment. I'll talk more about the show itself. This year was probably the first year that I not remember watching, but remember the aftermath of. So I would have been in primary 7. So for everyone that isn't from Scotland, I don't know what that is in anywhere else, but I was about 10 years old. And I remember Lordi winning. and it being on the news. And I remember talking about it at school with friends and being like, oh, this is so cool that these monsters won. Obviously, I didn't think they were actually monsters when I was 10, but these monsters won this singing competition. And then I remember watching the next year, 2007. That was the first year that I properly sat down and watched. So this kind of like ignited my interest, I suppose. Maybe not made me a Euro fan, but it ignited my interest in Eurovision. And I think 2006 as a year was kind of building up to the crescendo of cheesiness that, you know, really climaxed in 2008. It just, you could tell that, you know, a lot of the entries were quite showy, cheesy, weren't serious. I don't want to say joke entries because, you know, talent goes into writing these and performing these. And Tim's already mentioned one of those being Sylvia Knight. I think it's Augusta, the actress's name that plays Sylvia is so like committed to the performance, like all throughout the contest. She is like, does not slip out of Sylvia. Like, she is Sylvia. She's there to be Sylvia. She's there to cause bother. And yeah, like she's fantastic. But we'll get more into that later. But I am really happy that it kind of fell where Greece won 2005 and got to host in 2006, because I think if they had won 2006, it was just not to get, you know, quite serious, but it was just before the financial crash happened in Greece. So they may have not actually had such a great time hosting the following year in 2007 or 2008. So I'm quite happy that Greece got their chance to host, and they really put everything into it. It was a great show. Like Jazzi said, there was some slower elements to begin with, but I think it does pick up in the latter stages of the show.
Yeah, I did not watch Eurovision 2006 originally. I got into it a lot later, and I think also if I had watched this at the time, I wouldn't have gotten into it. That's also just from the kind of music I used to listen to, especially. But even then, what I feel is it falls into this very awkward transitional period of the mid-zeros where you had like Idols was dominating, X Factor was just starting, and that shows in a lot of the entries. Especially where it's just a single singer on stage. It was a lot of the time just like, oh, here I'm just going to stand and sing, and there's a show happening around me at the same time. So that felt very like finals/semi-finals of those shows for me that I just never really liked. And then you had the other ones, like even Las Ketchup fell victim to it, the Spanish entry, where it was like, oh, we put these four people together and we're going to see how they're going to sing, and everyone just it felt very much formulaic of like this person sings, and like we just have every person shows up once, and then we have like this big moment that should make people vote for us. Listening back to it, I like the surprising amount of entries, but also like the entries that I like surprised me. But I'm sure we'll get into that later, as we said. But yeah, for example, Bosnia and Herzegovina really surprised me with how much it really hit me in the end. But it was this sort of awkward transitional period of Eurovision for me, I think. But I do think that Lord, and also the thing is that Lordy One sort of turns into that. Like that was sort of the point where we really saw you can do different things in Eurovision again. We sort of had like the 90s where you had that moment of like, oh, we do Celtic music, where both Norway and Ireland started doing that all of a sudden, and that kind of vibe. And that's then, yeah, from 2008, 2009 onward, you really saw like more experimentation in entries again, I feel. But you see really the roots of that occurring here already.
2006 was the kind of year that Eurovision was always kind of in the background in my house, kind of before I properly started getting into it. And I vividly remember Harry Mama Mamata Harry basically in the background. And I do remember like, oh my God, this is happening. Like I didn't like, this was me at age 7 or so. So I didn't really know too much sort of what was going on. I was just perfectly content with whatever. But looking back on it, 2006, it is a little bit of a hit and miss year for me. There's some elements that I absolutely love, and there's some elements that I really don't like. So I love the fact that we were able to, you know, carry on having these wide, diverse range of songs. I do think, I think this was the first time that Armenia took part for the first time. So that was fantastic. And great to see that, you know, we were able to start sort of opening the borders to the Caucasus, which would later then go on into 2007 with Georgia and 2008 with Azerbaijan. And I did like the actual hosting as well. I did think that Sakis and Maria did do a really good job. In terms of like the things that I didn't like, I understand that this was sort of representing Greek culture. However, the staging for the stage itself was so clunky to me. It just seemed so rigid, and it's actually not really a great sort of one to put graphics on behind. Now I understand this is sort of before we got into the sort of Moscow 2009, where everything else then got really like big into LEDs and stuff, but it could have been executed better, essentially. And I will say that it's just the fact that, okay, for context, North Macedonia used to be called the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And it usually you would sort of have that abbreviated to FYR Macedonia. However, in Greece, obviously, when they are hosting, because Greece has a region called Macedonia, and they are very, very strict about, distinguishing between the two, they went to the lengths of literally spelling out the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, just to make sure. And I was like, okay, fair enough. It was something that I did find a little bit of an issue with, but the rest of it was fine. Some of the song quality I absolutely adore, but we'll get into that in a second. But overall, I think Greece did do a very good job in hosting the show. They seemed like they knew what they were doing, and you are definitely right in saying that this was at a time when Eurovision was very formulaic, and everyone sort of like, okay, this is the recipe to win. So you have to do this thing, you have to do this thing, you have to have a key change, you have to have like a rip-off dress at some point. Like it was fully leaning itself into this idea of, kitsch and glam. And unfortunately, that has sort of stuck in the UK. I don't know if it's the same where it is in Europe, wherever you're listening. I do think that there needs to be, like, the legacy of the contest definitely has stayed in some places. Yeah, overall, I had a really good time with it. I think just sort of leading on from this, we were talking about the song quality and everything like that. What would be your top 3 of Eurovision 2006?
I feel like I've already gone into 2 already. My first is Greece. My second is Finland. And my third I always struggle with, because there's quite a few songs that I really, really like or have grown to like. But I would say Nina Nana. I can't even actually say. It's one of those words. It's quite a tongue twisty word. Nina Nana. Yeah. It is the Yugoslav. It's the North Macedonia's entry. I just think it's such a fun song. It's quite different. It's quite a dancey number. It's quite fun to listen to, and I've listened to it quite a few times on your ESC radio while I've been working as well. So it's maybe that's half the reason it's really grown on me. So I kind of went into my top 2 earlier by mistake. So I don't really have much to say, but I think I will give a little bit of a shout out to Daz Sampson's Teenage Life, because I do feel like it's the first ever Eurovision song I ever heard. I do kind of like it.
What an introduction to Eurovision through Daz Sampson.
I know. I know. But part of me feels like I wouldn't even be on a podcast or anything like that if that song didn't exist. Because, like, when I was 10, my goal in life was to learn the rap word for word. I will reiterate, I was 10. And I think if I hadn't been 10, I wouldn't have liked the song as much as I did. Rory's looking at me like, really? Like...
It's okay. We can all have our wrong choices from time to time.
I just like it. I just like it, okay?
Looking at I've mentioned 2, but they weren't actually in my top 2. Well, one of them is. I'd say my third place would be Dima Bilan. Shocker, I actually like something from Russia. But out of the 2 entries that he's actually submitted to Eurovision, this is actually my favorite. I think he should have won with this one. As much as Finland deserve, I don't like rock. Like, Lordi's a good act. I just don't click with rock. Like, everyone knows that. I'm the pop person if you want to refer to me. My second place would be, oh God, there's a lot of them. I really want to say Lithuania just because it's a boppy. We are the winners of Eurovision. I mean, you came sixth and gave Lithuania their best result, but still, it's kind of funny that, you know, you had the guts. I applaud you for how brave you are for actually singing that song on a contest without even winning. So really, props to you. And my number one is, of course, Carola, just because I'm that basic and I love Sweden.
Yeah, I mean, this year I didn't think that I would like so many songs in it. I didn't watch Eurovision again last weekend, so I did have to listen to the recap, and I was like, okay, I'll write down anything that like catches my ear, and then I'll listen to it more in depth. And I had like most of the songs written down. So I did get a top five, but I'll try and condense it down. I won't talk too much about the ones that people have already mentioned. So number one was Finland, Lordi. I think, you know, it was so iconic and it stuck with me. And it's the reason that I remember Eurovision and started watching Eurovision. One that hasn't been mentioned, that's my number two, and it's probably going to raise some eyebrows, is Germany. No, never by Texas Lightning. Sorry, but I just love continental Europeans trying their hand at like American country music, especially when it's Germans or Dutch people doing it. I don't know, there's just something about it. It got stuck in my head, so it's my number two. Iceland is up there. I love a good like satirical entry. I love that all of the people in the stadium were booing it. I just love that she was just ahead of her time. Nobody got it. And yeah, I have to also mention the United Kingdom, Samson Teenage Life. I guess today we're dwelling on the past from back when I was young in 2006, but Daz is such a big Eurovision fan, and you can just tell he's enjoying every single minute he's on that stage. And that's what, you know, that energy I really enjoy. And I think to finish up, my sort of number five, it shouldn't really be number five, it should be number one or two. But Bosnia and Herzegovina, I think Leila, by Hari Matahari. I think it is probably the most beautiful song of 2006 of that competition. Like its quality compared to the overload of campness that exists within that year. And I think it probably deserved to finish first or second, but I think maybe a few of the block votes that existed back then kind of maybe pushed Russia up into second. Not to get into that, but yeah, that's my favorite ones really.
I mean, as someone who is Dutch and German, thank you for defending Germany at our weird attempts at American music. I also want to shout out for Denmark 2001, was it, Rollo and whatever, if we're doing that kind of stuff. I won't be mentioning Germany then in that case for my top three. Like they're also like somewhere in my top five-ish if I had to make a list. Like just the songs that where somehow the melody stuck a bit with me tend to be like, especially for 2006, are just highest in my list. And then it has to be Bosnia and Herzegovina. It has to be Ukraine, Show Me Your Love. And then just to like change it up a little, I would say the one country that whenever they performed to Eurovision were always robbed, have continued to be robbed and are sadly no longer performing, Andorra. I know something about the Catalan language, I think just appeals to me, but also of the more standard singing competition ones, that was one of the ones that just stuck with me the most. And it's had, like, I am just, if someone sends in a vaguely Balkan ballad, I always love it. Like, that's my massive fan of Albania, for example, of the time. And this had sort of that, like, Western Mediterranean then, but it had sort of that same vibe of the type of ballad that we're looking at. So yeah, those, but I could mention more countries like Greece, obviously, as well. But there were just, like, if we're talking about the top there, there's quite a close competition.
My number 1 and 2 have already been mentioned. My number 1 was Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that's mostly just for the fact that that has stuck with me, and it's that shot of sort of the the singer sort of like, and it's like the above shot, like the kind of the bird's eye shot of when it pans around the arena, and like Harry, Mama Mama for Harry is sort of just stood there in his T pose, you know, and just, you know, enjoying himself when all of the singers are in the background, just sort of like just enjoying it in the instrumental. My number 2 is Ukraine. I'm the Ukraine stan. I have to defend Tina Karol, my babe. And also just in general, that whole long note, I aim to do that in my life at some point. You know, we also have some other really good ones as well. One that you guys haven't said that I thought you would have said at the very least is Croatia, Moja Stikla. Absolutely love that song. It's so naff, but like it tells a story. It's doing it in a funny yet like informative way. It's very culturally representative of what Croatia would normally send and of what the Croatian sort of music scene would be like. And she went on to have a massive career as a result of it. So I think it became like the most listened to song in Croatia for 2006. So I'm not surprised. Other honorable mentions I have to give to the Netherlands, Treble Amambanda. I absolutely love that song. I think y'all were sleeping on it in the semi-finals. Norway, Alva Dansen, I think, was also another robbed song. And it's also the last time we had a song in Norwegian as well. So I think that needs to change very quickly. Albania, Zjaraftot, I do love that song. I think that was very much underrated. Spain, of course, Last Ketchup. And this could potentially be like a little bit of a potential problem. Not a problem, but like a little bit of a poor choice. But I kind of maybe do like Romania Tornado.
Tornado. You know, if you haven't been to Eurofest or if you haven't listened to ESC radio for some time, this gets played on a loop and the dance floor goes crazy.
Understandably, it's a very good song, and like it's kind of like a little bit of a guilty pleasure song for me, because like I don't know, like when it comes on, like I hate it, but also at the same time I just can't help but get down to it, and also at the same time like also just sorry,
I
go
was
on.
going to mention this song did go off at Manchester Calling though, didn't it?
Oh, it did, literally, like everyone kicked off. It was like, it's not to the same level as like Shum, but like similar. But yeah, and also just in case if you didn't know, Mihai has an OnlyFans now, so you know, and he does be promoting it a lot. So just in case. Yeah, no, 2006 is very much one of those ones where like if I like the song, I really, really like it, but if I don't like it, then I absolutely hate it. So sort of the likes of Poland, Portugal, also Slovenia, Switzerland, UK, absolutely hated that. Yeah, it just comes down to each one really. But yeah, so 2006, right, was the absolute, well, it was leading up to the sort of the peak of our cheesiness time in Eurovision in this sort of era. Do you think that, you know, it was needed for that sort of time, or do you think that actually there should have been more sort of serious sort of songs that sort of built up the reputation of the Greek ability to host the show?
I like novelty entries. I think they it keeps Eurovision fun, and I don't think like I couldn't imagine like these noughties years that had these novelty entries without them. Like it kept the contest fun but competitive, because some of these like novelty entries are not necessarily bad songs, they're quite fun songs to listen to. And in following years, some of these like novelty songs did quite well, and because they're fun and you enjoy listening to them. I think the most obvious one you can talk about is the following year, Verka Seducha with Dancing Lasha Tomboy. It came second. So I think they're needed in Eurovision, and I think it set a good precedent for them. Like in 2006, I think a lot of them didn't get to the final. I think some of the only ones that we saw in the final were Spain, but unintentionally, and obviously the UK but again, we saw these in the final because Big Five. So a lot of the novelty fun acts that we saw in 2006 came from the Big Five, unless it's Sylvia Knight. So who didn't make the final, unfortunately. She absolutely should have done, absolutely robbed Queen. But there you go. Yeah, I think it set a good precedent for them, because I think in the following years they went on to do quite well in the contest. So, and I do think they're needed. I do think you can't have 24, 26 serious entries. Like, people wouldn't watch, or people would get quite... I think people need something fun to watch during a very long show. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, I would like to echo that. Like, what I've noticed a lot is, for me, the more gimmicky entries and joke entries, or whatever you would like to call them, they've aged the best for the most part. Like, you have a few of those like fun classic timeless ballads, and they age well. You have a few of the pop songs, but a lot of the more purish pop songs have aged poorly, like most pop songs will tend to do, because that's the nature of the genre. But a lot of the more gimmicky entries, they're still fun to listen to. And I can understand that at the time, a lot of people would either, like, something like We Are the Winners was very polarizing at the time, as we could hear from the crowd, yet also the result it had. But if you now listen to it back, it's a really fun entry with a bit of like a lot of different people can get into it. Like, you can see it more as a jokey entry. I have sort of the semi-rock vibe that I get from them that I really appreciate. So I think it was definitely necessary, and I think it also sort of took away from the pure glitz and glam that some people try to bring into the contest, that turns people off like to kitschiness, as it were, and turned a bit more into like, we can also have fun with this, instead of it's this serious like thing that we need to present. I need to present myself very seriously. And I think that just makes it a lot more fun to listen back. But I can definitely understand that at the time, a lot of those entries were very polarizing. I think if I was into Eurovision back then and I was a bit older than I was, I would have not liked Sylvia Knight, even though now I've adored the song. And similarly, I mean, a gimmick entry on a different kind of scale, Kate Ryan performing for Belgium, who I'm surprised nobody mentioned in their favorites. I really like the song, but it's... at the time, it's sort of like this gimmicky thing. Like, also Spain, this person that was successful 3 years ago, let's just push them onto the stage. And it didn't work out. But now a lot of people say it's one of Belgium's most dropped entries, which is tight competition considering, Belgium's recent years.
Yeah, I think looking back on the years, it is needed. I do find it very entertaining watching back to those sort of cheesy filled years, much more than I do the sort of ballad filled 90s years. But I do think that if I'm going to look at it from a UK perspective, it has really actually damaged the country's, or the general view of the contest, especially because of the commentary of Terry Wogan at the time. I think really did negatively influence people's view of the contest. And we're still actually now, I think actually throughout Europe, still trying to combat that view of the contest. Although I do think it was maybe needed. It was going to happen anyway. It was just the sort of product of its time. We moved into televoting, and then it just became like, we hit the millennium and everything was flash and new and poppy and cheesy, and that was what was big. So obviously that's what was going to happen. So we couldn't have really avoided it. I do think in 2006, we did actually have some quite serious entries compared to like 2008 anyway, or 2007. Like Ireland, for one, they got one of their better results post the year 2000 in 2006. And they did it by basically copying what they did in the 90s. For some reason that worked in 2006. But yeah, I do think it does make it more entertaining to watch back on. And we do need these sort of, at least a few cheesy pop songs or joke entries. But I am glad that we're now a bit more serious overall.
For me, what I would say about 2006, I think it's one of those years where, you know what, we just need to let it all out. Like, get all the crazy and funkiness and anything in between. You can range from, like, I don't know, having 6 different singers from Switzerland, Natalia Gordienko, and, the ketchup. It's like, you just need to put everyone in one room and then just let them be. And see how that goes. And I think that method worked just because of the fact that it kind of let everything out. And since then, it kind of just progressed on and got more serious and serious and serious. And I think I think this was the beginning of just like, remember, in 2006, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the people voted by telephone. So there wasn't a fair balance of A, who qualified, and B, how people were voting. So if there's no second opinion, it's mostly on the people. And I'm going to be very controversial here and just say the people are not always right. And there are countless examples of that at Eurovision. And so I think when it got to 2008, where that became very obvious, I think this was sort of the lead up to it, because, you have like a few countries who are just like, okay, Western Europe, not so much. I mean, looking at the result, like Finland was like definitely West, but then if you look at it, everyone's like mostly right. And the ones that you normally see in the 90s are just like, yeah, they're not there anymore. So I think this was the start of like how the juries got back into the contest. But you know what? I would say it's needed, because of the fact, if this didn't happen, then we wouldn't have had the serious, credible competition that we have today.
Yeah, I definitely think that, I think the best way of saying it, and the best way of sort of summarizing it, is that the mid-noughties was very much a case of lack of taste. The noughties might as well have taken a COVID test because there was a lack of taste. And I think, this was just kind of par for the course at the time. And everything really was glitzy and glamorous. And people were very much a case of, okay, well, we might as well just chuck everything at it, because we've just had the 90s, which have just been so sort of serious, ethno ballad, all these kinds of things. And it's hard to say that things would have turned out differently, because it wasn't. I mean, we were still in the period of 100% televoting. There was no jury in there whatsoever. And in a way, that's good, because it means that the public is getting 100% of the vote. However, there were some very questionable choices in there. And there's no denying that 2006, it is still going to be sort of one of those years that you will remember, because it's only in sort of recent memory anyway, but you'll remember for either fantastic reasons or really bad reasons. And this is kind of leading me on to sort of like our final kind of question. 2006 had a lot of milestones in there anyway. So we had the 1000th song to be performed in Eurovision in Ireland in the semi-final. And as well as that, we also had the first instance of, in the voting, this was the first year that only the spokespeople would be saying 8, 10, and 12 points, which dramatically reduced the amount of time that it would take to sort of do the voting procedure. I mean, it was still a long time, of course. I think they managed to shave about maybe 20 minutes off of it or something overall. With that in mind, and with the fact that, everything was all glitz and glamour and things like that, would you class 2006 as an iconic Eurovision year?
I can say it's an iconic in a sense of the milestones you describe it at. It's like we're in this midst of just like, technology is becoming far more available for the show to become better. So in a sense of the way the show's produced and the way you present each performances, yes, like definitely like the HD broadcasting of it now that we just saw last weekend. In a sense of songs, maybe not, but I think, like I said earlier on, I think it's just something that we had to go through, and then, change will just follow along, and it's prevailed, and, I think it improved on from that point. It just went on and on and on. So I don't see any issue with that. But it is iconic in a sense where I think it was a stepping stone for things to happen.
On a technical aspect, like introducing the HD, changing up the scoring so it didn't take as long, stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. Song-wise, not really. I think we've seen like transition years, like 2009 being like the transition to the jury era, 2016 being the transition to the modern era of Eurovision. I think they were a little bit more iconic transition years, and I think they're more notable. But this is still a good one because it gives us like the high quality that we get to, like the high quality presentation on the TV that we get today. Without 2006, that we may not have that. Without 2006, we may not have the reintroduction of juries, because 2006 was probably the year it became quite apparent. Hey, you could probably send whatever you want and do quite well if you're a certain country. So in some ways, yes, but there's been bigger iconic transition periods since, as I mentioned, 2009, 2016.
Yeah, I think I agree with what's been said already, but I think on a sort of personal level, I would view it as iconic in the sense of what I've already said before. It's the first sort of Eurovision winner that I remember hearing about and talking about at school. So on a personal level, yes, but also the entries themselves, they kind of fall into, in my mind anyway, a sort of grey blob of like a few years of 2006, 2007, 2008, not 2009, because it kind of became a bit more serious then. But those 3 years together are kind of just one in my mind, and they all have a similar vibe about them, I feel. So I wouldn't say it was iconic and very, if you mention something, you were like, yes, that is 2006, unless you mention the stage, which is very claustrophobic, that's been mentioned before. Yeah, there's nothing iconic really about it apart from what's already been said.
Yeah, I wanted to say that 2006 wasn't iconic, but then I think back on the one hand, like a lot of those songs, like a pretty big number of songs just show up in like those yearly compilations, like whether it's like Sylvia Night, every year on German television, they show that performance in their top 5 weirdest performances. And then you have like, you know, the Dima Bilal person from the Piano Nonsense, or like Lordi obviously showing up everywhere. But a lot of the songs just show up in those yearly compilations, which clearly shows there's something iconic about them. But as Bradley said, it sort of all turns into emotion, just mostly recognizable by the stage. But that might just be like us being both too close and too far from 2006 to really either have the direct knowledge of it or feel nostalgia towards like that period of music in general and Eurovision in particular. I would say like it's not iconic in the sense of, oh, this is one of the top 10 Eurovisions even that I would recommend someone to watch immediately. But it's definitely iconic in the sense of there's just a large number of singular performances that I would want someone to see if I try to either get them into Eurovision or just show them something more.
Yeah, I think the thing with 2006 is that when it hits hard, and when it misses, it like completely misses. And it's very hard to put it in one specific box. I think you're definitely all right in saying that, you know, specific performances, so, you know, Lordi, Russia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, like literally the top 3, most of the top 10. And I think most of those top 10 deserve to be there because their performances were iconic. And, you know, Sylvia Night was iconic, and the interval acts, like Helena Paparizou singing Mambo, was like iconic within itself because of how like kitsch it was. She did a fantastic, and honestly, I wish I was able to be that like iconic in that sense and talented. When I think of 2006, the first thing that comes into my head is not necessarily a positive thing, and I think it's because 2006 to me, alongside 2008, was the gimmick year, the year of the gimmick. There was always something that's like, oh, you need to have something visually going on that completely like makes you stand out, essentially. And I think this was the time when performance was sort of going over the quality of the song. And of course, because, you know, more and more countries were starting to join in, like this was only 2 years after the introduction of semifinals, and we had like an extra 15 countries join us in this point. I think it was a scramble to sound as if it was, or to seem as if you were able to sort of show off your entire like country and this whole idea within the space of 3 minutes, like this idea that we all know and love now at this point was only just was really just starting to take off at that point. And I kind of like it, but to me, it's iconic for the wrong reasons, basically. So, you know, the fact that there were so many joke entries, like, it's all well and good to have these entries, and, you know, they are definitely needed to sort of, you know, increase the lightheartedness of the whole show. However, when there's that many, it does sort of detract from the overall quality of the year. Like I said, the hosts were okay. The staging was a bit iffy. I mean, I totally understand why the staging was staged like that, because, you know, it's just, you know, an amphitheater, and, you know, Greeks, they were here before everyone else was. I don't know. 2006, it's one that I will come back to every now and again, but it's not one that I'll be like, oh my God, this is by far and away the best Eurovision that we've ever had, because it isn't. 2007 was miles better than 2006. 2005 was all right, but not to the same level, sort of apples and oranges. And so it really just fell to circumstance and what was popular at the time. But iconicness is definitely a word that we could be using for this, but it also could just be really cheesy. And you know what? We need that in Eurovision every now and again. So who knows? Maybe 2022 could be the new thing. Although with Italy hosting, I'm not too sure. But yeah, just before we wrap things up, does anyone have any sort of final points about 2006?
I do miss the iconicness. That's all I'm going to say. I do miss the iconicness. And I think it will go in a full circle, and we'll come back to that in the future at some point.
I mean, who knows? Maybe the next time Greece actually wins Eurovision, hopefully when they can afford it, they might be able to, you know, put on another great Greek Odyssey for us so that it doesn't turn into a tragedy. But yeah, do we sort of have any other final points?
I may moan about some of these songs, but I think I can guarantee if I hear some of these songs, like not next Friday, the Friday after at Eurofest, I will be dancing along to them.
Might as well.
Yeah,
but
might as well.
Exactly. Fantastic. I guess if no one else has any ideas of what to say, I guess it's time to end this edition of that Eurovision podcast. Just before we end things, we have to mention that the TES Awards for 2021 will be ending very, very soon. 21st of August is when they are going to be closing at midday Central European time. So, you know, follow our links on all of our social media. We've been posting them left, right, and center. So find it, vote on it. You know, your vote matters. I don't have the stats close to me at the moment, but I do know that there has been a fairly tight race going on in some of the categories. So, you know, just goes to show that democracy is really needed. So, yeah, fantastic. So please get on that by the 21st of August. We will be sort of revealing them in I think, articles and in a podcast episode as well. So, you know, stay tuned, basically. But yeah, in the meantime, please do continue to follow us on all of our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at That Eurosite. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on our YouTube as well. So you know, subscribe, follow, all of that stuff. So you always get notified for whenever new episodes come out. And yeah, going forward, we'll be carrying on with some of these year retrospectives, country retrospectives, as we're sort of in the off season. You know, we might as well sort of look back and just think, oh, how great was May 2018, or as Natalia said in her interview not in her interview, in her qualification thing this year, with our question, 206, and all of these things. So the more we have of those, the better. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. So shall we all say goodbye?
Bye.
Bye.